Hey, hey, I found the music. I found the music that works, y'all. Oh my gosh. I am so excited to be here with you all today. Welcome to this fine Wednesday. I can't believe it's already Q4. We're in the blender, y'all. I'm right there with you. But today, we have such a special guest. So if this is your first time, welcome to the party. This is Thumbstop Live. We are live every Monday to Friday from 11 a.m. Eastern to 1 p.m. Eastern. And we're bringing so many of the people you know and love in our community to the stage so they can share more about their personal story and how that connects to business more than anything. So if you're live and you're catching us on YouTube Live, my family over there, hello, hello. The LinkedIn Live side of things, how's it going? The Instagram live side of things, welcome to the party, y'all. And of course, Twitter and X, the people over there. So excited to be here because today we have one of the legends here. We have Andrew Faris. This guy's the man. Everybody already know. We check out his pod all the time. We listen to all of the good content. And today I'm so excited to get the peek behind the mind into seeing how he operates in his day-to-day. So without further ado, I would love to welcome Andrew to the stage, y'all. Let's give him a round of applause. How's it going, man?
Good. I'm tweeting right now to tell people that I'm going live also, and giving people the warning / invitation that if they really want to see me super up close, now's the best time. If you really wanted to get like a very good look at what my face looks like, now's the time, because we got a new camera. Oh, excuse me, new camera, maiden voyage, trying to get it settled, and I think it looks nice, but boy, am I close right now.
I feel like this is one of those ones we could create a new format where everything is like super zoomed. Like I can come up here too, and it's just like, hey, this is how we're doing the whole thing, and then figure it out.
Yeah.
I love it, man. Well, Andrew, get the tweet out. But there are so many different things that I'm going to want to get into with you, of course. But before we get into all of that, for the audience who might not be as familiar with you, I'm wondering if we start just like nice and easy. We can talk about the close-ups. We can talk about all that. But if you could give us like tell us about yourself, some of the business side, some of the personal side, honestly, whatever you're open to sharing. And then we'll take it from there if that works.
Sure.
Cool.
Sounds great.
Hit me with it, man. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. Some of the business, some of the personal, like wherever.
Oh gosh. Okay. So super broad.
Just to fill in some of the audience.
Yeah, great. Yeah, man. Okay. Well, I'm in LA, Greater LA area, the South Bay of LA. If you know the area well, let's see. What are the things to know? I started in D2C 11 years ago. Was a media buyer at Qalo, QALO. If you know Qalo, they were like the first silicone. Let's see right there. Can you see that? The first silicone wedding ring people. So that company in 2014 went $0 to $20 million in a year and a half with bootstrapped, so it was profitable, etc. So that was a crazy journey because in those days businesses just like D2C businesses just weren't that big that fast, and it was like because it was bootstrapped, it was like get anybody you know who can figure something out and put them on the team, and it was a whirlwind. And I was in the midst of a career change, and so Taylor Holiday was a friend, and through a bunch of different things, and thought, hey, you'll be good at digital marketing. He sat down in a Starbucks that was inside a bank with me and told me what I'd be doing for work. And I remember he said, like, you're going to use these digital advertising platforms, Meta ads, or at the time, Facebook ads. They didn't even have Instagram yet. Facebook ads and Google ads, and you're going to use that to get customers in the funnel, push them down the funnel, and they're going to buy. And I stopped him and said, what's the funnel? So that was where my marketing knowledge was at. And so he drew out for me a funnel on a napkin. That's where I started. So anyway, so went there, was there with Taylor and team for about a year and a half. Taylor went and like he had already started Common Thread Collective to some degree. It was under a different name and some of those things, but it was starting to grow a little bit. And so I went with him basically when he really kind of split off from basically doing partially CTC, partially VP of marketing at Qalo. He really started pushing on CTC, and I became the first growth strategist at CTC besides Taylor. So he split the clients in half and handed half of them to me, and he kept half. Kind of that move that early agencies have to make, that actually my agency's in the midst of making now, which is sort of like from sort of freelancer with a supporting team to we're actually now doing an agency, and I ended up being there. So that was really cool because I got to see the growth of CTC from the ground up. I mean, it's crazy to look back at the content we were making then because it was so bad. Like we just didn't know anything. And some of our clients in those days, pricing structure, everything about it, just learned so much. It's just crazy how much the DTC community in general has learned since then. It's out of control. So, stayed there for a while. Ended up being the sort of head of growth there, head of strategy. I don't even remember what my title was, but sort of the right hand to Taylor. And then when CTC spun off our own brands as in the aggregator craze, we did our own thing that was called 4x400. I went there to lead growth there, and then ultimately to be the CEO of that, and did that for a couple of years, and ran that business into the ground. So it just was mostly moving through failure, and I'm happy to talk about any of that. But we added up to 6 brands in our portfolio at a time, and yeah, that was that. And then in 2022 started AJF Growth accidentally. Did not plan to be a sort of agency guy or even really a freelancer. I was interviewing for internal head of growth jobs and talking about going back to CTC, doing all kinds of things, and ultimately ended up with a few freelance clients in hand and started finding ways to support those clients. That meant adding team members. That suddenly meant I kind of had an agency sort of, and I was still making content at the same time. Then people wanted more of my work. And so now there's that. And now AJF Growth is a team of I don't even know, 15 of us or something like that. 3 in the US, 4 in the US, and then a bunch more in the Philippines, who are just, I could go on and on about my love for working with people in the Philippines. They're just killers. They're so good. And so that's what we have now. And Patrick Cadu joined me in the last 6 months or so to come on and be the COO and a business partner. Patrick, some people know, is the guy who built and sold Supply razors in 2022. Was a Shark Tank guy, went through a full exited to an aggregator, and is getting back in the game. So yeah, it's been a really fun 11 years in e-commerce. I got a wife and I got 2 boys who are 3 and 5, and that's the best. I could talk about other things too, but that's the career overview.
Oh my goodness. Okay, incredible. So much to unpack there. I do want to spring all the way back to when you're talking about, okay,
Sure.
you're going to be managing this funnel. What the hell is the funnel? And getting that drawn out. So something that I'm curious about is as you were going through a career transition, did you have an idea where you're like, okay, I think I want to go this marketing way, or I think I want to do this other thing. It's I'm going to learn everything in there, or is it just so you happen to land in it?
Happen to is an interesting word, because that's a lot about how you interpret the world. I think that actually gets into some worldview questions. I'm a person of faith, so I actually think there was a lot of divine providence involved, is the way I would frame it. And there's a lot of ways I could tell that story, but the short version of it is that I was leaving a career actually in pastoral ministry. I was a pastor before. And wasn't sure what I was going to do. And in the midst of a lot of upheaval in my life, I went and worked in a warehouse for a little while with Kalo. Was not planning on staying there. It was just an easy kind of low key job while I was kind of getting some other things straight in my life. And when that happened, I started working with Taylor. And Taylor and I and another really good friend of mine in that company, Taylor and I and that friend had been in a fantasy baseball league for a long time together. I have here. Oh no, his head just fell off. Let's see. Forgot. Let's see if I can keep his head on. That's from my championship. I don't remember what year. Does that say on the year? 2017. Yeah, so that's later. But yeah, they gave us that when we won the championship. So that fantasy baseball league, I learned almost everything I came to understand about analytics and metrics through being a baseball fan. So yeah, baseball, if anybody, all pro sports now, but baseball was always on the leading edge of the integration of serious analytics into sports. And it was through reading Moneyball originally, and then doing fantasy baseball and just being a baseball fan, sort of having my mind open to thinking about the world probabilistically and analytically and statistically. As that all happened, Taylor knew that and said, you have the right kind of mind to understand marketing analytics, because you don't need a degree in statistics to understand marketing analytics, but you do need to understand how statistics work and how analytics work in the world. So that was a lot of it. And my friendship with Taylor, et cetera, which had actually started in junior high.
No way.
And,
That's
and
awesome.
like I said, divine providence. I think we had sort of disconnected in life and then reconnected later, actually through this fantasy baseball league and through through Taylor's college baseball career and some of those things. Yeah. So anyway, so there's a bunch more to it than that, but basically Taylor was like, "You'll be good at this," and then also with a background in like theology and teaching and stuff. I was teaching theology at a college and some of those things.
Nice.
There's some ability to think about communicating ideas as well, right? So the combination of sort of communication and then analytics ended up making like digital marketing a really perfect fit for me.
Huge, huge. So I also asked Taylor about this, but I'm interested to get your perspective on it. So one of the main pieces of advice I think is thrown around in society today is like follow your passion, find your passion, work in your passion,
Mm.
some variation of that. So I'm curious, like in your story, let's start with the high level. Does it feel like that's advice that resonates with you, or do you have any other opinions that you'd like to share on that?
I don't think there's anything more obvious in the world than the idea that one of the fundamental problems with the human condition is our desires lead us astray all the time. Um, I mean, anybody who has ever eaten too many donuts understands what I'm talking about. Where it's like your desires, lead you to do that, to eat more junk food than you should, or to have more drinks than you should, or whatever. But then you snap back to reality at some point and discover that actually the outworkings of your decisions, the consequences of your decisions. I mean, I've used this phrase for a while, and Taylor has too. We've talked about this, but the phrase I use is consequences are signposts to reality, which is the idea that like when you eat too many donuts, you pretend that you live in a world where donuts don't make you sick and fat. But reality is the world where they do if you eat too many, right? And so the consequences that you have are reminders of what reality actually is. And so follow your passions. There's something definitely right about that. If I'm taking a sort of sympathetic and if I'm trying to hear that phrase meant the best way possible, then I know what people mean by that, and I think it's right. I think the challenge, or I think there's something right about it. That there's some way in which I've also found it's very hard to stop people from doing the kind of work that they really want to do. If you've noticed in an organization this is why people do surveys like culture index surveys and things like that. It's because there's just ways in which I'm just going to gravitate towards certain things. This is the reason I brought on a COO, is because I cannot build process. I thought I was bad at building process. I'm actually worse at it than I thought. And so the critical thing for me was like, anyway, so there's this thing where there's this reality that we recognize that we're good at some things, we're bad at some things, we like doing some things, we don't like doing some things, and there's something to that. But I also think your passions are going to lead you astray all the time. I think it happens constantly for people. And this is like fundamental to, like I said, to the human condition is sorting out where those things. In fact, the way I would frame it is what I really want to do personally in my life as best as I can. And by the way, like me as much as anybody, I'm not talking about other people here. I'm talking about myself. In all kinds of ways. What I want to do is try to personally, the way I view the world is that I want to try to bring my passions and my desires in line with reality as best as I can. And in terms of like ways in which they snap into the things that bring joy in the world. So yeah, this is a very philosophical answer to your question, but
Yeah.
it's something I think about a lot. Is like I am of the opinion right now that and it's actually something I've been actively thinking about. I'm of the opinion right now that there are more things that are objectively real about the world than we let on, and that the more we can find those objective sort of truths in the world, and then align our actions and behaviors and thoughts towards them, the more likely our lives are to thrive. So should you follow your passions? Sometimes. Sometimes you really shouldn't, though. Sometimes your passions are gonna lead you into a very dark place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is
Yeah.
so interesting because I think the core of this becomes like, what is the definition of passion? Like there's a textbook definition,
That's
but then
right.
there's also
That's
like
right. Yeah.
a social understanding of like what that means. And I feel like that's what
Yeah.
you're really hitting on. I feel like that's what you're really hitting on.
Yeah, yeah. And there's just, I mean, like I love baseball, and I'm not going to try to convince you to love baseball if you don't love baseball. And I don't think that's like a good or bad passion. I just something in my soul, and certainly because of my cultural, upbringing, I probably wouldn't love baseball if I lived in India and grew up with cricket, right? Like,
Sure.
but there's a bunch of these things between culture and something that resonates with me. Where like I also grew up around football and basketball, and I don't love those sports the same way. I enjoy them fine, but like I love baseball. I love baseball. It's an
Yeah.
important part of my life. I don't think that passion is good or bad. I do think, however, that if I wanted to give my whole life towards trying to work in baseball analytics, it would be irresponsible to my family. Like it would be a mass, like it would eat up my, so anyway, So there's ways in which I think the passion is neutral. There's ways in which I think, I mean, I actually think the way that the place baseball holds in my life is an objective good. Like, I think it's really, I think it's part of the joy of life. But at the same time, there's ways in which that passion could really lead me astray.
100%, 100%. I'm in Toronto, so shout out Blue Jays. We're going up.
Oh, let's go Blue Jays!
On the way up, baby.
Yeah.
But one of my best friends is a scout for the Jays, actually. So he's living
cool.
like one of like the dreams at that point. But it does come with a lot of the baggage that life does come with. Yeah. Also, shout out to Hannah in the chat, getting a peek into Andrew's brain. So it's super cool. It's super cool. But yeah, one of the pieces, like, I think that you added there with the cultural context on top becomes super interesting, because let me know what you think. But with passion, because I've been thinking about this a lot and having a lot of conversations.
Yeah, what's your answer? Yeah.
So if you asked me when I was younger, passion is, I found to be attached to like something tangible that you could feel, or some type of domain. So for me, growing up, I played basketball pretty competitively up until my first year of college. So I let that thing fly. And I was like, you asked me, I was like, I'm working in basketball. I'm doing everything in basketball. This is what it is. But when I stopped playing, it became one of those questions of like, who am I? There's an identity conversation that happens. But as time goes on and I've been able to reflect, I think like when I think about basketball, what I've realized is what did I like about it? I have really fond memories. That's one. So there's the cultural piece there. Then the other pieces are like, I love competitive environments. I love actually getting better really quickly. And I love solving problems like on the fly, essentially. And it's like something was super empowering about being able to pair it back to say, like, was it basketball, or were there certain elements that gave me this emotion in my day-to-day? And where I've kind of landed with is like, of course, you got to do something that you're good at and you can get compensated for. But I can pretty much do those 3 or 4 things in any domain, no matter what it is, and get a pretty good kick out of it. So for me, there's just like the cultural context. I haven't said this one before. I layered it for you. Based on your definition, it's like I have a lot of fun memories of like with friends and what comes with that. So there's passion involved. But the 3 things that stand out to me are competitive environments, getting better every single day, and then solving problems on the fly. And I get to do that literally every day at my job. So it's like that for me, like gives me the emotional rush. And my definition of passion is just like what gives me happiness, less of a desire more than anything. But like if I do this action, what gets me going, essentially.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to tap on that last part, I think one of the problems is that a lot of things that we think will make us happy actually don't. This is what you discover over more time. I mean, even your reassessment of what mattered in basketball to you, I think is a good example of this, where it's like maybe you thought basketball was the thing that was making you happy, but then you're actually able to go, actually, maybe basketball was only part of it, and it was actually these other elements that were there, and I still want to play basketball, but it's not the whole thing. I don't know. So I just think this is sort of like, there's just all kinds of examples, countless examples of people who go follow their passion into a massive destruction in their life. So so not everybody, but but to your point too, I think you've also tapped into some things that are objectively true to human thriving that get funneled through something that's just more subjective to Evan, which is your love for basketball, right? So that's where I would say your love for basketball is like neutral or good or whatever. But then, the idea of like solving problems and working with teammates and having this part of a community identity and things like that, I think those things are true to all human thriving. Like, I think it's the reason why it's really important that people have, as best as possible, the more we can provide, work for people that is meaningful, because that allows them to then go solve problems. And that's really dignifying for people, I think, to go solve hard problems. And one of the really hard things when you watch people in certain situations is like the way there's a challenge where if their work doesn't provide that kind of value, or they stop working or they can't get work, it makes their soul kind of shrivel in a way that is really challenging, So anyway, I could go on and on. This is like a much broader, because you told me this is like a broader interview than just D2C stuff. I'll weigh in on any of this stuff, but
of course.
That's what I think. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And something about our conversation so far, there's like a huge element of reflection that's involved. So it's like we've gone through life, reflected, and like been able to reassess what that starts to mean. So I guess what I'm curious for you is like the broad question of how it can tie to business and personal is like goal setting. Like, are you the type of person that sits down at the beginning of the year and says like, this is what we want to accomplish in a year, and then you peel it back all the way to like a weekly plan? Or are you somewhere in between of like vibe it out and like, where do we want to go? What type of person are you typically?
In terms of, sorry, ask the question again. Are you asking like, do I set hard goals?
Yeah. And mainly, sorry, to be super clear about it, I'm mainly thinking about like the personal side of things. Like if you sit down to start the year, are you saying like, what type of person do I want to be in a year? What type of father do I want to be in a year?
Yeah.
Partner do I want to be? Like that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And then you'll work back. Or how are you typically thinking about personal growth and goals there?
Yeah, I've come to think that this is something that people respond in different ways to. Like some people I think do very well with that kind of goal setting, and I don't really. I don't. I find that they just don't motivate me very much. They don't like if the point of that kind of goal is to create some kind of motivation for me or something like that. Like, they just don't actually have that effect for me. I just kind of wiggle out of them and I don't really care that much, especially if I've made them up myself. I'm too aware that they're arbitrary and subjective. So I'm much more of a like a 1% better every day kind of person. So where I don't like, I have these things that I'm constantly reflecting on, thinking through and reading about and talking with my friends about and talking to my wife about and all that stuff. And then I'm like, okay, well, how can I do this like a little bit better all the time? That's been true in a lot of areas of my life where it's like steady, slow improvements over a long period of time have led to the kinds of outcomes. So yeah, I'm not very motivated. I'm willing to do those kinds of things in a communal, like in an organizational setting, where like, at AJF Growth, Patrick and I just set some, goals for the next few years, for example. And I think that's probably good. So there's some objectivity and accountability when you've got other people involved. But for myself, I'm a big journaler. Like I'm just writing about like,
Nice.
hey, I snapped at my kid a little bit more than I should have yesterday. I don't want to do that. How do I cultivate more gentleness in my relationship with my boys? And that kind of thing. So it's just like, I have some objective sense of the kind of moral framework I want to have in my life and the kind of things that are creating good. And then I'm trying to sort of evaluate my behavior according to that all the time.
Yeah, no. So there's something because you make it sound like super easy in the sense of, okay, my brain works this way, and this is how
Yeah, couldn't.
This is how my brain works. I'm journaling to make sure I got to make sure I'm like reflecting.
Yeah.
I'm having conversation. I'm reading and educating myself. Something I've actually spent more time recently talking to people about is the idea of like self-reflection and fast course correction. So it's basically like exploring a topic and then like, oh, I learn and I adjust at that point. And people are asking me, it's like, well, how do you do it? And like, I don't really have a method to my madness. There's like I have to come back to the present moment and like realize what's happening, but I try to make it extremely fast. And I'm wondering if you have any like best practices or like frameworks on how people can self-reflect better to be able to then course correct.
What do you have an answer? I have an answer, but I'm curious what you'll say to this.
What I've found it to be is like my mind's all over the place. So if I don't like practice a bit of mindfulness to start my day, so it's like I find the cushion and like I'll literally come back to the breath. That sets me up for the rest of the day to be able to say like what's going on. And then I always I try to orient to the goal no matter what, like in any part of my life. It's like, what am I really trying to accomplish here? And it's like, is that serving that? Am I on the right path essentially? So that's what I do. But honestly, a lot of it is like just intuitive when it starts to come up. So I don't have the best answer.
Yeah, I think when I really like hearing people say things like what you just said, because it makes me think like maybe I need more of that kind of thing for myself. Just this notion of like having a really specific daily practice. Do you have kids?
I don't, but I can't wait to have kids at some point in my life.
Yeah. It just makes, the thing I've found is that small kids make any kind of morning routine extremely difficult to maintain. And so, so that's another thing for me is when I listen to people weigh in on things like this is this question of do you have kids or not and how old are they? Because I just think it's such a massive factor in this. Like I don't wake up to an alarm or to something like that. I wake up to my 5-year-old or my 3-year-old coming into my room. So yeah, and they're coming early. Like they go to bed early and they're in my room sometimes they're up at 5:30. Like hopefully they're not up that early. That's definitely not the ideal, but like, this morning 6:45 rolls around and there's my 5-year-old. So it's great. It's just that it throws off. Then they need food and they need attention and they need all the things, so that kind of morning routine's been hard for me to maintain.
Sure.
I think for me, again, I come back to two things. One of them is I would call the pursuit of wisdom. So just like in a broad sense, listening to people like in podcasts, things like that, reading and trying to generally understand what things will produce thriving in my life. So there's like a mental aspect to this of me of like, mindfulness is a great example. Like I've tried some mindfulness practice at times. Like the way I would assess that is I would try to go and say like, well, who are the sources talking about this, and is what they're saying, um, is mindfulness actually likely to produce good at this sort of objective level? And I would view this very objectively, not just subjectively. Like if mindfulness isn't working for me, then either the problem is with me or with mindfulness. And if mindfulness works, I'm assuming the problem's with me. And so that's the way I tend to view problems like this. So I would start there. I would try to assess this kind of thing, and then at the level of daily practices, and I think that's important, is like trying to pursue truth as best as possible. At the level of like daily practices, I I would think about things like, yeah, journaling I mentioned is for me is extremely helpful. Part of it was I freed myself from it. Always felt like if you were typing your journal instead of writing your journal, like you were doing it wrong, like it's not personal or like spiritual enough or something like that, you know?
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like handwriting in a journal, like with a moleskin or something, that feels
Yeah.
that feels like a really good reflective way to journal. But I freed myself from that. I'm a super fast typist. It's maybe arguably my best skill in all of life, which is depressing. Um, so I just freed myself to type, and that has like made it so that like I just have like I probably have 15 years of journal entries in I'm the last guy using Evernote, and I still have them all in Evernote, and yeah, and they're in there, and so that's been like a really good thing for me. And then friends and relationships, like having these conversations with people who are in my life, who know what's happening in my life, and who I could talk with honestly. You know, I'm constantly trading texts, hanging out with friends. Like it's mostly friends of mine from church and stuff like that. So
Nice.
we're just sort of always up on each other in these kinds of ways. So yeah, those are the things. Community journaling has been really helpful for me. Yeah, I mean, frankly, church has been really helpful for me.
Huge.
And then yeah, some pursuit of objective truth that I'm trying to align myself to.
I love that, man. That's so helpful. That is so helpful. It does make me think of another question. I think the way that like you and Taylor would probably talk about it is like a 4-burner system. But something that I often reference is like every element of my life was a certain light bulb, right? So it's like I have my relationship, my wife, family, friends,
Yeah.
community, mental health, physical health. That list will continue for however you are.
Yep.
And it becomes like
Yep.
impossible to light everything up at once in the same way the 4 burners are. So what I'm curious
Yep.
about is like, how do you think about how you distribute your energy across the different areas
Yeah.
of your life?
Yeah. But by the way, physical health you brought up just there is a good one.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned that. I think in the midst of all these things, sleep, fitness, I think it's just demonstrably true that those things, nutrition, help you generate the kinds of outcomes in life that you want. So, sort of trying to hammer away at those things has been helpful for me too. So I'm glad you mentioned that
Mm.
alongside things like journaling and pursuit of truth. Um, I don't know that I'm great at this, the burners and the light bulbs. So here's a good example of where I think my passions and desires are not always serving me very well, and where I have to like reflect on them. It's just drastically easier for me to go to work than it is a lot of times to downshift my mind to a 5-year-old or 3-year-old's level and to be present with them. It's also drastically easier to go read about the pursuit of truth and wisdom in the world or something like that than it is to go and sit and like, you know, again, like do like painting or art with my boys or something like that. Even something like sports with them is really fun, but I mean, they're 3 and they're 5. They suck at it. Like they, so I like playing with them, but like we can't play catch yet, really. I mean, like, so, yeah, uh, I think there's just like, there's an element of that where I have to like reorient as much as I love them. And I actually like spending time with them a lot, right? I'm not saying I don't like spending time with my kids. It's just that it's much easier to follow my desires towards doing more work than it is to be present a lot of times with my boys. I get tired at the end of the workday too, so that makes it harder and some of those things. So this is like a good example of, I think, where trying to sort out those burners and light bulbs and desires is just really hard. And
Mm.
and I think yeah, I think that's it's a daily challenge. The way I've tried to do it again for me is to try to think as objectively as possible what I think is going to create thriving in my life over the long term. And the answer to that question is that doing a good job, working diligently and working hard is really important. And it is possible actually to have the like family burner turned up too high. Like I think people sort of fetishize the idea that like you're almost like work instead of spending time with your kids is bad. And I think that's wrong. Like your kids actually need to see that you value your work and you work diligently at it. It's an important example. But But of course, that can also be so much easier to be drawn to get the laptop out, to get the phone out, to respond to their email, whatever it is, that like that can also be a problem. So I've tried to think as objectively as possible. Like, what are the things that are going to create the life thriving outcomes that I want? And then to try to align my time and all of that, even when my desires are sort of fighting against me a little, towards those kinds of outcomes. So I think that's probably the number one thing for me for getting all those things right is that my desire to work out more or something like that might actually just be vanity. It might just be that I want to look better with my shirt off. And that's not really the like most virtuous desire of mine. I don't think, as much as I think it's okay to care about your body, of course, but like, yeah. So I try to like, think like, how much do I need to do that? I'm like a 3 to 4 days a week kind of guy, So anyway, there's a lot of that kind of stuff, where I'm evaluating. I don't know. Does that answer your question at all, Evan?
Yeah, really interesting call out there. I think one of the more contrarian takes is like, if your family burner is too high, because I think a lot of people's goals that I've heard of recently have just been around like how to maximize time with family. But I'm almost wondering if in their state, it's like an overcompensation because they know they're not spending enough time. Because like I'm getting a chance to talk to a lot of successful people, right? So it's just like, shit, I should be better there. I should be. So it's more aspirational rather than reality at that point. So it's really cool to hear.
Well, maybe they should. Maybe they should be. I mean, I think I'm not an always on work guy, right? Like I'm not like, I don't work an 8-hour week. I work like a 40-hour week, basically. If there's client travel, it's a little more. If there's not, it's sometimes a little less. I probably should take a little more time off, but I don't work crazy work schedule weeks. And it's partly because of, again, my assessment of what's going to lead to like my life's thriving, is like, I don't know, I probably, maybe I would be more successful if I worked more hours. I think that seems reasonable to me that would be the case, but it probably depends what you mean by success. So exactly. I think there is a trade-off there. I also think there's this like, in our community here, gosh, this is the most I feel like candid about my worldview I've ever been in an interview. So here we go.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
In our community, I think there's another thing that happens, which is like, it's like the entrepreneur types are just in general, like super optimizers. Like like when I talk to my non-entrepreneurial friends, I'm like the only guy in my group wearing a Whoop and like walking on my desk treadmill and all of that kind of stuff. They're all like pretty content, like living a more normal life. And I've come to think that it's just like a thing with like entrepreneur types is like, I'm the only one drinking non-alcoholic beer. I'm the only one drinking, like, it's just all of them are like, what are you doing? Like, just drink a beer. And they're not alcoholics or anything. They're just not crazy about this sort of stuff. So I think one of the downstream effects of that though, is there can be like almost an always on thing in your mind. And I'm speaking very much about my own experience here that says, here's how you can be better. Here's how you can do better. And it's like, okay, you're working, you could be working more, you could be working harder, you could be working more efficiently. You're doing fitness, great. You could be running marathons. You could be, going to the CrossFit games. You could, whatever your fitness of choice is, right? You could be doing a try. Like, okay, you've got a family, great. You could be spending more time with your kids, being more present with them, turning off your phone more. And it's just like more. And it's like this all the time. And that's a double-edged sword. It's just a double-edged sword. The kind of person who has that thing going is probably going to have some success in life. They're also going to struggle, I think, with some other things. So that's at least for me, I think that's part of the challenge of working this out, is this sort of constant back and forth of these things. And this is again where for me, I'm like trying to evaluate that always on thing relative to like as best as I can understand what is actually going to help me thrive and what's not. Sean Frank tweeted the other day, your parents made it through their whole lives without ever knowing their sleep score. I thought that was a great little illustration of the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's like, that's super funny. And it's like, exactly right. It's like, maybe we're overdoing it a little,
Shout out to Sean.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah. Honestly, now that you bring it up, it's like, I was lucky enough to be like the first commercial hire at Motion. So it's like being on the sales, customer success, event side, community side, all this kind of stuff. And my brain often acts like an entrepreneur as a spirit rather than like the career at this point. But it's literally like, I'll have so much that I'm trying to optimize and have to be like, wait a second, is this actually serving me? Like, is it actually going to be able to, like, or is it going to burn myself out? Like, what's going to happen in that case? Andrew, one of the things that this makes me think about is like, I appreciate you being so candid about the now. What I'm curious about is the journey to this point. So something I think about and have talked to other folks about is the idea of the seasons of life. So it's like different seasons, and it feels like kids would have been a big point. It feels like the jump of careers would have been a big point.
Yeah.
What I am thinking about though is like, as you think about the different seasons in your life so far, was it obvious when things needed to change, or did it feel like it just slapped you in the face one day where you're like, I got to make an adjustment here? Does that make sense? Sorry, I'm trying to see how this goes.
No, it's good. Yeah. Yeah. Well, when in some ways it was super obvious. There's just like elements of my life that clearly were not leading to my thriving, where I think every human in some way runs up against the problem of their own behaviors and desires and things like that. And so there's been definitely moments of that where it's like, hey, this has to change because it's definitely not producing thriving in my life. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of examples of that where it's just clearly the case. I think a lot of the other ones are fuzzier, and I don't really realize that I'm in them until time. Well, so like for example, going from 4x400 to AGF growth is a good example of like something where it had to change because the business was not going to be viable anymore. We were going to run out of money, so it was just like this like big flashing light saying something has to change here. Like, so yeah, so I think there's like some elements of that mixed with you know those kinds of moments happen where it's like you just hit a breaking point. Something has to change. It's personally, professionally, everything else. Other times it's definitely more subtle and it's like, okay, well, we're going to shift this thing over here and we're going to have kids now or something like that, even that I'm hesitant to use that example because of a number of reasons that again, get into some of my worldview stuff. But we
should talk about that offline because like that's one that I'm so curious about because like I am an over optimizer.
I'll do it now. Ready? I'll do it now. Have kids earlier than you think. That's for most people. That's my statement. We can leave it there for now, but that's it. Yeah, there it is. Anyway, so there's some things though otherwise where you just sort of realize that your life season has changed and some of that. So yeah, I don't know. It's a mix, yes and no.
Yeah, it really is going to depend on because I almost feel like
what do you think? Tell me, why'd you ask that question? What did you like? Have you noticed this in your life where you're like
I think so.
You see different things. Yeah, tell me why you asked that or why you think that.
Yeah, so on the work front, it actually feels more obvious. Like it's just like I have taken on too much and it's too horizontal of a team or something like that. And it's like clearly need to be able to hand off more. And like that's a different version of like it could slap me in the face and like I realize it. But the areas that I tend to overthink is let's use kids as the example, right? Like my wife and I would love to have kids somewhat soon. And one of the things that I've often been thinking about is like, I work way too much. Like if I don't try to figure out like how to best like, I don't know, take myself out of the gruntiest of the grunt work at a certain extent. And like, I don't find a way to create more time in my week. Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to be a shit husband. I'm going to be a bad father at that point. And that's something that I tend to over optimize for in my mind. And I think of like getting ahead of it rather than waiting for it, essentially.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I think you're making the right assessment there, which is that like the cost of children on your time is going to be massive, right? So this is like something I always try to affirm to people when they bring this up is like, you're completely right in that assessment, which is that your allocation of time is going to have to massively change. It just is. But the question is, again, what's going to lead to thriving in your life? So which allocation of your time is going to lead to thriving in your life? So But yeah, I see what you mean.
This is turning into like a therapy session, but like my hope in this case is like, because I enjoy solving new problems and like solving them quickly, like something about children, like obviously it's not like a problem to solve every single time.
Yeah.
But just like at least in your own mind, like, I should just be happy for them or give them a hug at this point. Like something along those lines just becomes potentially a fun element.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? What have been, if you try to answer as objectively as possible in your life, what do you think have been the greatest sources of joy in your life?
My wife, my family, and then work, honestly.
Yeah. I think that's about right for me. And don't give me the right answer here. Tell me what's actually true for you. Okay. So how did you rank those as best as possible? Ranking might be tough, but yeah. And somewhere in there, put your friends.
I'm curious. So friends is an interesting thing. Like we can talk about that too. So like I'm an only child. So I grew up really lucky and close to my cousins, but I always get to describe it as like when things got tough, it was like see ya rather than having to push through. So in a
Yeah.
sense, like my friends and like the closest
Yeah.
people to me have really evolved to grow to be like my wife and my parents in a sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
we can talk
Yeah.
about that more. I'm definitely down to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I had to rank it, the number one thing that drives me, and I've thought about this recently, is more selfish than anything. But
Huh.
like nothing gets me higher than learning something about myself that I can then
Nice.
change. Like it's so to be like, oh
Nice.
man, I walked off that conversation with Andrew. Andrew didn't love
Yeah.
how I asked my first couple questions, too wordy. Damn, like let's make this like it's a bit cheesy in a sense. But when I
No, I hear
learn
you.
why I tick the way that I tick and I can make an
Yeah.
adjustment, I'm like, that was so fun. That was so
Yeah.
fun. It's like that's the
Yeah.
number
Yeah.
one thing. That's the number one thing in all honesty.
Good. Yeah. It's good.
How about
Yeah.
you?
For me, it's people. People are by far the easiest
Mm,
answer to this question. Is that all the greatest sources of my life are relationships, and almost everything else fits within that. Though I agree with what you're saying. Like the sort of self improvement thing is really addicting. Like I love that feeling. Yeah, it's really satisfying thing. Um,
that's the good thing
yeah.
about I feel like that's the good thing about like being able to have such like a faith-based community and being able to like
Mhm.
have a community
Yeah.
you can consistently go to on an ongoing basis. Like something
Yeah.
about that creates routine, consistent alignment, and consistent conversation at that point.
Yeah,
So I feel
yeah.
like
Yeah, and
it is worth
relationship,
it.
I mean, I think this is something that a lot of people talk about, just like how, especially remote workers and stuff, just how hard it is to find friends and make friends, and I'm super sympathetic to that. It's just not,
Mhm.
I don't relate to it really at all because, for me, like just the church thing is such a big part of my life. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
so it's part of where I find those things. But yeah, it's for me, it's people. And so like my experience of this kind of question of like with kids and stuff like that, to come back to it, is that like kids are a massive constraint on the rest of your life, but that uh, uh, they also are like the greatest source of joy, and that like the actual pathway to maximizing your joy is love, I think.
Mm.
And so the expansion of love in your life is a constraint, right? I mean, you already made the decision with your wife, which is like by choosing a wife, you have chosen not every other woman, and that is a constraint. You've actively opted into a massive constraint to your freedom by doing that, but you do it because that actually creates a kind of like that restriction in your life actually creates thriving and love in a certain way that creates joy. You know, so I think the same thing is true with your kids. That's the
Let me know
short answer.
if this is too woohoo, but does like
No,
does self-love fall in there at all?
good question. I think probably, yeah, I think probably it does. I think, uh, yeah, yeah, I've never personally wrestled. I should probably not say too much about this because I don't think
Sure.
I can reflect on it very carefully. Um, yeah, I would sort of rate my own opinion of this at a low level. I think I've never experienced the kinds of anxiety and depression and self-hatred that some people have experienced. And so I think people who have experienced that reflect on their changing relationship to themselves in really significant ways, in the ways that I think you're describing right now. So I should
Mm.
probably let them weigh in on how they play this out, because for me, it's just not been something that's been like I've had plenty of problems and plenty of struggles, believe me, but not that. So yeah.
Oh man, and you've been so generous with your time. We've gone over here,
Oh,
and there's a there's so many things I wanted to get into, but we didn't have a chance to. But I love where this conversation went. Like this was so much fun, man. This was so
yeah.
much fun.
Thanks for having
Uh,
me. This is great.
I have one final question that I ask
Yeah,
everybody who
sure,
comes up here about.
sure.
So hopefully I'm going to clip it together at some point.
Okay,
If you don't have an immediate answer, throw it to me first. I got your back. I can help out.
okay, all
The
right,
question
okay.
is, it's not a hard one. It's just like sometimes it's not top of mind. But I'm wondering, do you have a favorite quote? And if so, what is it and why?
Okay. I don't know if I have. Yeah, yeah. I do have a favorite quote. I'm gonna pull the actual uh, pull the quote for you.
Nice.
C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis is sort of famous author. People know him, British guy. This is something that has like. Let me see if I can find the actual quote here really fast. Yeah, yeah, okay. Um, this has been defining for the way I think about faith and life and what I'm trying to accomplish in the world. And this, I think, actually is applicable for people. It's going to be framed in a Christian sense, but I think it's applicable for almost anybody to think about. Um, so I think a lot of people think about the relationship of themselves to sort of faith and objectivity and things like that. as if there's like a giant sort of set of endless moral rules weighing down on you, and all these kinds of things about how sort of religion works in people's life and stuff like that. C.S. Lewis, British author, Chronicles of Narnia, you know, a bunch of other stuff. He has a little essay called The Weight of Glory that was really effective. That was really powerful for me when I first read it. It's free online. You can find it anywhere. It's worth your time. But his intro, he says, he's talking about the way that our desires work out in life, and the way that we think about how our, and this is, I think, fitting for this conversation, how our desires fit our behaviors, and how those two relate to each other. And so I'll just give you the quote. It says, Lewis says, "It would seem that our Lord," talking about God, "it would seem that God basically finds our desires not too strong, but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased." And that image, right, of a child making mud pies in a slum because he can't imagine what's offered at the holiday at sea, is the way I think about faith and joy in life, which is like, whenever I'm not tapping into those things that are most important, it's not a problem that my desires for bad things are too strong or whatever, but actually that my desires for good things are too weak. And that I want to be, and that like the actual offer of the world and of, in my view of God, is that there's a kind of joy that's possible that exceeds anything else ever. And if we can tap into that kind of joy in the world, then we can tap into the most profound, shaping, beautiful experience of life that's possible. So that's been a thing I got. But I always say, like, I'm optimizing for joy, and it kind of comes back to that quote for me. So there you go. What about you?
Freaking goosebumps! Freaking goosebumps!
Yeah. Okay. Okay. What about you? What's
mine?
yours?
Evolve with the different seasons of life. So in all honesty, like right now, as I talked about having like a horizontal team, I'm trying to figure out how to like extract a little bit myself at least. And one of the ones I'm leading into is like a Derek Jeter quote. So he just has like a 3-line version. Yeah.
Okay,
there we go.
Baseball
there we go. But he has 3 that he leans into, where it's just like preparation builds poise, builds confidence, confidence changes everything. So preparation builds poise builds confidence, confidence changes everything. Yeah,
that's really good.
So in every area of life, like, make sure that you're prepared as possible, but also give yourself the time and at-bats you need to get really great at something. And then, of course, like, once you reach that confidence level, so you got the swagger a little bit in there. So yeah. So that's mine right now.
All right. That's really good. Man.
Yeah. This is incredible. I'm wondering if you have any final words for our audience today.
Go Blue Jays.
Knock it out the park, baby.
Yeah.
Andrew, you're the best, man. I sincerely appreciate the time.
Evan.
I sincerely appreciate the time. I'm gonna talk to you real soon. Okay. All right. Later.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Yep. See ya.
Man, everybody, that was so much freaking fun. That was so much fun. All I see is like Andrew's tweets, like a lot of us, right? We might have talked a couple times, but being able to get a peek behind the lens into how he thinks is like something I am so deeply grateful for. That was such a fun conversation, even if it was so zoomed up. But everybody, this has been today's episode of Thumbstop Live. I've really enjoyed the time. I hope you all have too. Again, we are live every Monday to Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Tomorrow we have Creative Strategy Summit though, so come hang out with your boy. It's going to be a good time. I'm not going to be talking about as much stuff as this, but we'll be back again with another crew. But everybody, go flood Andrew's DMs. Go send him love. Like, that was such a good conversation, y'all. I appreciate the time, and I'm going to catch y'all later. Peace.